Welcome. In today's episode, we are going to see filters which are called slicers. They are available in Excel as well as Power BI. We'll see Excel first and then go to Power BI. So, what are these filters? And usually, we use filters in two different contexts, one with raw data and the other one is with reports, which could be pivot tables, charts, or visuals. So, we'll see both variations. So this is the agenda. We'll first start with Excel tables, simple raw data, and how filters or slicers can be applied to them. So let's try that first. So here is some data. And in that data, what do we have? Some columns. All these drop downs we are quite aware of. That's normal auto filter kind of filters, but we are not talking about that. In addition to this auto filter, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, we have something called slicers. And those slicers are very useful. So where do we see slicers? I don't see a button called slicer here. So remember, this is a table. This is a table. So if you go to the table design tools, and then you will see insert slicer. Now, what is it asking me to do? It's allowing me to choose the columns which I want to use filtering on. So for demo purpose, we'll just take one column right now, click OK, and it just shows me a floating filter like this. And when I click on something, it's going to filter it. Control click also works for multi-select. So it's very easy. I can have more than one filters as well. But right now, for demo purpose, I have just kept one. If you multi-select, how do you get rid of it? You click on the button here, which is clear filter, and it's done. What is this? This is to allow multi-select. Now, normally when we do multi-select, we click, control click, control click. So why do we need a multi-select button? This is specifically for situations where you have a touch screen or a tablet and you don't have anything equivalent of a mouse cursor or mouse pointer or a stylus. So you just click or touch using your finger first on multi-select and then actually go and multi-select. So that's very easy, effective. But now let's create a pivot table and see how this is working. So I just created a pivot table and we will put some stuff there. So I'm going to put, let's say, gender, card type, and amount. Doesn't really matter what the pivot table is. In this case, we are interested in the filtering part. So let's actually create two separate pivot tables. One showing by card and the other one showing by gender. And just to make things a little more interesting, let's also put a pivot chart, simple pie chart. We'll make this smaller so that we can make some sense out of it. And I will get rid of these buttons. How do you get rid of these buttons? Right click, hide all field buttons. So we have two pivot tables and one chart based on the same data. So now this is a pivot table. This is not a table. So where do I go? Again, pivot table, analyze option. In that, we have two different options. In table, we had one option called slicer. Here we have timeline. So just to compare this, this is table, table design. What do I have? Insert slicer. Only one type, nothing else. Whereas in a pivot table, we have insert slicer and insert timeline. Okay, so let's try with the slicer again, similar user interface. This time, I'm going to choose two, month and year. Okay, now when I add these, of course, there will be two windows floating on top of each other. We can arrange them. Now, just to recap, if you don't know how to use slicers, how would you have done filtering in the pivot table? You would have gone to the pivot table and put the year in filter area and month in filter area. This is there since 30 years, I don't know, long lasting feature. Now look at the difference here. Suppose I filter on 2014 and then I filter on Jan. What happened? The pivot table became empty. Why? Because there is no data for Jan 2014. But how did I understand that there is no data? Only when I selected 14 and Jan, then I came to know that there is no data. Earlier I didn't know. Similarly, if I have selected something and I have multi-selected it, what happens when I multi-select? It doesn't show me the selected items. It just shows the phrase multiple items, which I myself am going to forget 2 minutes later exactly what I have selected. So that's another problem. So let's keep this as it is. But now let's compare this. Now one problem is I don't want this to occupy unnecessary space. So I'm going to make this shorter so that I can have like this. But ideally I don't want scroll bar as well. So maybe what we should do is look at the slicer. Look at the slicer, click on the slicer. There is a menu for it, special menu for a slicer. And we have columns. So let's put 2 columns here so that the vertical height is reduced. And let's do the same thing for month, where we'll probably give 3 columns. And now in a limited area, we are still able to fit both the filters. Ideally, we should not overlap them and avoid scroll bars. So that's done. Now it's the same thing as I did earlier, but look at the difference. The moment I click on 2014, see what happened. I can visually see that out of all these, there seems to be data only for September. I did not have to do any extra effort. This is very good. So filters filter each other as well. Very nice. Similarly, if I remove or let's say go to 2020, I can clearly see there is no November, December. The only problem here is by default, notice what happened right now. Jan, Feb, March, proper order. The moment I click on something, in this case 2014, what is going to happen? This Jan, Feb, March starts and suddenly September came up. Why is that happening? Because as of now, September is the only active one. So assuming this was a long list with a scroll bar, that September may not even have been visible. So by default, it actually brings them up. If you don't want that behavior, no problem. Go to slicer settings, and then what do we want to show? We want to show custom list? No. We want to show hide items with no data? No. The fact that there is no data in Jan, Feb, March, the absence of data is also important from business point of view. So what is the thing which I want to show? Show items with no data last. No, that is not what I want. So now what happens? Now it is still in the correct order and I am only able to see visually this one is available, this one is not. So that's how you use slicers. Now the best part is, or the worst part right now is the slicer is only affecting this pivot table. It's not affecting the other one. Don't worry, that is also thought of. So go to slicer. Why is it affecting this pivot table? Because I created it in the context of that pivot table. Now remember, this pivot table was a copy of this, so they are sort of shared data source. So now when I go to slicer menu, I have report connection. Now what is this report? Pivot table is called pivot table report. So now it's going to show me all the pivot tables which are based on the same data cache or the underlying data. Right now we have 2, we could have 10, and they may be across different sheets also. That's fine. So you choose the pivot tables, click OK. And then I will have to do that for the other slicer as well, of course. And then same thing, report filter this. Now, obviously, these pivot tables need to be given better names. How do we do that? Go to pivot table, analyze. Here is the name. Like a table, you can give a name to a pivot table as well, which makes it easier to choose the right pivot tables for filtering. And now it'll affect all of them. So as we go along, everything is getting affected, and this would work across sheets as well. So that's how you use filters in pivot tables. Now let's move on to Power BI. Power BI, similar situation. So we have a pie chart here, and I'm going to create filters for this. So don't worry about what data this is and what is the structure of the data. We are just talking about filtering. So this is one visual which is here. We'll use this to judge the impact of the filtering. So this visual will remain constant. I will put different types of filters. Now, when we talk about filters, there are filters here, but those filters are available during edit mode. We don't want that. We want an interactive filter which is visible to the user at runtime when we share the report, even on a browser or mobile phone. So there are a lot of visuals. One of them is slicer. Of course, they don't behave exactly the same way as what happens in Excel, but bottom line, it's just a filter. So you click on slicer, it gives you empty visual, and then you choose whichever field you want. So let's say I want type of city. So I can drag drop directly here, or I can drag and drop it in the field area, one and the same thing. Now this view is a little cramped, so let me just apply a theme which will make the font size a little bigger. Let's not worry about that part right now, but let me just make it easier for everyone to understand. So all the default font sizes in Power BI are really small, so you should customize a theme and apply it so that it becomes bigger. So this is how you customize the theme. You go to customize current theme and go to whichever areas have fonts applied to them and just change the sizes. Okay. Anyway, so now this is a very simple thing. You checkbox, 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 but notice it's looking like a checkbox, but it is only showing me or allowing me to select one at a time. So people who understand the difference between radio buttons and checkbox may not find it professional, but never mind. Now, if I want to allow multiple selections, what do I do? So remember in Power BI, these are available fields. These are the fields which can be added to the current visual. So this is slicer. It gives you only one place to add fields. If the pie chart, notice I have multiple things I can add. 4: legend, details, values, and tooltip. So depending on the visual, this area changes. The second button here is called formatting, which controls the look and feel and formatting of the selected visual. So here we have selection controls, and selection control, we can say single select, multi-select. Now the default is it is multi-select, but if you want to multi-select, you have to press with control key. That's why it was not working. So if I now press with control key pressed, then it will work. But that's rather non-intuitive. So actually you should enable multi-select and not have this option. So what happens because of that? It works naturally. So what is the setting? Selection control, single select off, so multi-select on, and multi-select control off. That is the best way. So now it is more intuitive. If you want to get rid of it, click on the eraser, then all of them are unselected. Easy. Now this is a list. I can also make it a drop down if that makes sense and you are short on space. It behaves the same way but occupies less space. But even if it's a drop down, it is still multi-select. The idea is when I click outside, it's just going to collapse and save me some space. So nothing complicated. Now let's change the game. Now I'm going to put state, and it's obviously the same thing, but now I'm going to make a double layered slicer. That's something Excel can't do. So I'm putting state and city. So now notice what happened. Each of them got a drop down, and when I go to a particular place, it will give me filtered cities on that. And in that also, I am able to multi-select. Of course, this is not a good example as you are realizing, because if there are too many items, people will get confused. But multi-layered slicers are available, and this is how you do it. In a multi-layered slicer, we have some other options as well, which is slicer header, selection controls, and stuff like that. What is here? List and drop down. What else can be done? You can sort and stuff. Then items. You notice there are items, means what are individual items being shown. And this is the indentation between the two. So what is indentation? This indentation we are talking about. So I can increase or decrease the indentation. And then that triangle like thing greater than the caret sign can be plus minus, which is more intuitive for many people, or a standard caret which we see in File Explorer. So that's how you have multiple types of slicer functionality. Now remember, all this was text. If I put number, it's going to change. So if I put a number, it is giving me a traditional slicer with the unique numbers automatically managed, but it is also going to give me something better. What if I say drop down? It becomes a drop down, but there is a more important, more useful one, especially for numbers. So what is this now? This is giving me a slider with two areas which are active and two text boxes. That text box already has a number. Where did that come from? That's in my current data. That's the minimum and maximum. And this is current selection. So if I want to see only high value transactions, I would do this and then it will get affected. Or I want to see low value transactions, I will do it like this. So it's quite nice and interactive. Unfortunately, this doesn't travel. So if you have set the range and you want to move that range itself, that is not possible. So you'll have to do it twice every time to fix what you want. Of course, you can directly type the numbers here. Now, if you make a mistake, it is not going to work. So here I can say 100 probably, and the other one has to be higher than the first one. So like that. So that's how you use slicers. Now, of course, in slicers, we can even include pictures, but that is a topic for the next session. So with that, I'm going to finish today's session. And tomorrow we have another interesting session related to analytics and Power BI, in fact. And tomorrow's session is about how to use visuals as in pictures, as an interactive element of Power BI reports. This is not possible in Excel, only possible in Power BI. So with that, let's end this session. See you next time. Thank you.